Hello, Booker T. Jones there in Nevada, USA. Thanks for taking time to talk with us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for calling.
It's great to chat with you. Now, Booker, let's go right back to the start. Now, you were born in Memphis?
Yeah, born in Memphis, Tennessee, 69 years ago. I'll be 70 in November.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, I've got here that your father was a teacher?
Yes, he was a math teacher. My mother was a piano player, and her mother was a piano teacher. My mother's job she was secretary at an insurance agency in Memphis.
And so that's where the musical genes perhaps came from, or did your father play a bit as well?
Yes, he sang in church. He was an excellent singer, actually, and very emotional. And so I heard him sing in church, and my mother as well.
You're a bit of a prodigy, so when did you first pick up an instrument there, Booker?
My first instrument was probably two fingers on the piano, but I did, at a little bit older age, get a ukulele. And I think that formed the basis for my love of music, holding that ukulele for so many hours, and formed my basis for the love of the guitar, which I still have, still addicted to playing the guitar.
So how did you learn? Did you learn by yourself, or did you have a book, or did your mother show you how to play the ukulele?
There was a little booklet that came along, and I still have those little diagrams in my mind of how to play the G chord and the E chord. I think there were 4 or 5 chords, that little diagram on the wrapping of the little ukulele.
You know what? I've heard a lot of Booker T and the MGs and your solo material, and the ukulele doesn't stand out to me in any of the tracks.
No, when I approached over there with my little Sears Silvertone guitar, there was Steve Cropper playing, and also Chips Moman. There were 2 guitar players there. They weren't about to let me come in playing the guitar. So I told them that I could play the piano, and that's how I got in, playing keyboards. But actually, the first time I played, it was on baritone saxophone.
Right, so a bit later on, obviously, you picked up the saxophone.
Well, I just had the curiosity and the fascination when I saw the instruments. I had a neighbor that was coming up from Florida whose father was a band director, and he was practicing oboe in his grandmother's attic across the driveway from me. And I heard the sound of that oboe and got to go over there and see it. And I actually got into the band in 4th grade playing oboe, fashioning my own reeds, and nobody else wanted to tackle it, and I taught myself how to play it. So I just had a curiosity about certain ones, especially the clarinet and the oboe and the Hammond organ.
When did the fascination with the Hammond organ start?
That came from the piano lessons. I was taking piano lessons, and my teacher had one in her dining room, which was fairly odd and rare because it was a very expensive instrument for that neighborhood that I grew up in. So she and her husband were making a sacrifice to have it. But it was a wooden cabinet. It looked like a break front, and I saw it many times going in her house, but I, of course, thought it was one of her china cabinets. But when she opened it up, I asked about it, actually. So I saw a girl sitting in the room there with books, and I was curious about that. So she opened it up and played a few notes, and it was, of course, the Hammond B3 organ. And once I heard that instrument played through the Leslie speaker, I was hooked once again.
Right. Was she a professional player?
She was a piano teacher. I think she made her living teaching piano. She had lots of students, and most of the students were piano, and just a few were organ students. The organ lessons were 4 or 5 times more expensive than the piano lessons.
And it would have been quite an expensive instrument back then.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea how they were. They must have gotten a huge loan, and they must have paid on it for years to have it. But it was there. Some of the churches had the Hammonds. I heard those. But it was rare, I think, to be in a home. I was really fortunate because I lived really close, just around the corner. And
did she ever say, "Look, young Booker, I think you're going to be the most famous Hammond organ player in the world"?
Well, you know, after I recorded Green Onions and after we started Booker T and the MGs, she was quite proud, because she had taught me, she had given me so much. She was an effective teacher. But I think I actually got the feeling and the soul from my mother. That's where it came from. The teacher taught me the technique, but my mother, she was the one who knew how to play with feeling. Yeah. She played Debussy, she played classical music, she played gospel music, she played Rachmaninoff. She was accomplished, and I had a great mother. I was fortunate.
Yeah, obviously she influenced you heavily, because you also went and studied music too, didn't you? Classical music as well.
I did. After Memphis, yeah. I studied a little bit of theory in high school, but I applied to Indiana University, and I just made it into the music school there and studied orchestration, composition, conducting, and music theory. Well, that's what I needed. I needed everything. I was raised in Memphis, and there were no dedicated music schools there in Memphis. For my own purposes, I wanted to know how to write for the orchestra, and I wanted to know how to transcribe music for Stax. I did a lot of work for Stax, writing lead sheets and doing string arrangements for them, so that was my job.
When you were a young lad, still in early school, was in the back of your mind, music is going to be my profession and that's going to feed me and my family for the duration?
Well, not at first, Nick. I was just doing it for pleasure. I thought that I would be a physician, and I just didn't do well at it. I think I got a C or a D in chemistry when I was 10th or 11th grade, and around that same time, I think I made around $5 for playing about 30 minutes of piano at a T, and things just kind of turned direction, you know.
The money changed your mind. The quick and easy money changed.
It did.
Now, Booker, your first professional gig was at 16, and you mentioned before you met Steve Cropper and Chips Moman, so that would have been at the Satellite Record store?
Yeah, I was looking for a way to pay for the organ lessons, and I got a paper out, which had a fairly good number of customers, but I wasn't getting quite enough money each week to pay for piano and organ, so I was looking for additional customers outside my route. And I was on my bicycle, actually, and I went out to Macklemore Avenue, which was not my territory. There was transition. The whites were moving out, the blacks were moving in over there. So I thought I could get some customers over there. But I ended up riding by this record shop, Satellite Record Shop, and they had records in the window. I mean, 45s and 33 LPs, and inside there was Cropper, and he was a clerk, and that was his job, I guess, after school, too. Anyway, he played records for me. I didn't know we would be bandmates in the future, but I spent many hours in there just listening to the free records. I continued the paper out. I don't think I got that many more customers. I might have probably ended up with less customers, but I spent more time at the record shop than I should have, and I managed to save some money.
Plus, you were investing in your future.
I was. I didn't realize it. The problem was with the neighborhood, the only records available to us were out at the Sears store at Crosstown. So my dad would have to drive me over there. And you didn't get to spend as much time just standing and listening as you did at Satellite. Cropper would play for hours. He would just let me stand there and just listen and never bought anything, I don't think.
Jeez, and Estelle and Jim still kept him on?
Well, they didn't know. Jim was working downtown at the bank. And Estelle was really the owner of the shop. Jim was trying to build a recording studio. His attention was occupied with that. And Estelle was just trying to make a few extra bucks with the record shop. And she was busy with her family and her husband out in East Memphis. And it was Cropper and her son Packy, that would kind of run in the shop. And they would let kids like me in and, just listen to the records.
So, Booker, did they have in mind to start, Estelle and Jim Stewart, of course, started Stax Records. So did they have in mind, you mentioned that Jim was working on the recording studio, so did they have in mind that they were going to start a record label of their own, did they?
They did, I think. They had tried out there in East Memphis with the country music, and they were still trying with the country music, but I think this theater was available for them over there in the black neighborhood, and they had some dealings with Rufus Thomas, and I think maybe their tastes were beginning to change a little bit along with their kids. Cropper was a white kid listening to the Five Royales out there at Messick High School. That was quite odd. So
they started the label, and how did it progress for you?
It was quite opportunistic for me because instead of making $3 a week at throwing papers, I got to make something like $5 a day or up to $15 a day as a session player when I was still in high school. In addition to that, I was playing in the clubs at night, making $7 a night. So all of a sudden, I was making as much money as my dad. And plus, I was doing what I loved to do. So after about 10th grade, I had a full-time job there at Stax. So I was pretty happy. I was pretty busy, but, I could pay for the lessons, and I saved money for college, and loved what I was doing. I learned, I met Prince Conley and started playing blues and started doing lead sheets after school, and I could make $15 if I did 3 sheets for their copyrights, for their songs, and so it was a match made in heaven for me.
Don't think medical school had a chance there, Booker?
No, I forgot about it. I really did. I just completely forgot about it.
I think this is your first recording. You actually didn't play the organ, but you played the baritone sax on a Carla and Rufus Thomas record. Would that be right?
That's right, yeah. That was it. The one that got me through the door.
So when the record came out, you would have been excited. Did you get it and rush home and show your mum or whatever?
No, I wasn't excited about that, Nick. I was a sideman on that record, and I was really involved in school activities, playing in clubs. I mean, it was great, but the most exciting thing about that was the $15 I got for playing on the session. When I was excited was when we recorded Green Onions for Booker T and the MGs, and they had named the band after me, and it was playing on the radio. That's when I was excited.
Firstly, Booker, how did you come to that name?
Al Jackson, they listened to Behave Yourself and thought that it was something worthy to be put out. So they needed a band, they needed a group, they needed a name. They looked over at me, and I was playing the organ and lead instrument on it. So they said it'd be Booker T, and the engineer, Chips Moman, had a little British Leyland MG parked outside, a little convertible, so Booker T and the MGs. That was it.
Very simple. So how did it form in the band? Because basically you were sidemen, and how did you come to create those records? Did you have a bit of downtime and say, hey, let's do something ourselves?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, just the session that we were supposed to be playing didn't come together for some reason, or I'm not sure if the guy left, or not sure what happened. Well, we ended up with a free afternoon in the studio. And
so you recorded Behave Yourself and Green Onions. Well, Green Onions wasn't a bad chat to start off with, was it?
No, and it was an afterthought, too. It was a B-side.
Yeah. Well, it's probably one of the world's most famous instrumentals, and I don't know how many movies it's in, Booker. You've probably lost count, but it's in a lot of movies.
Well, I have counted, and I have music in 85 movies now. I'm working on my memoirs, and I'm doing that now, so I do have that number.
So you record these songs as an afterthought, and, well, whose idea was it, let's put it out on a record?
Oh, that was Jim and Chips. They were constantly looking for people to record and music to put out. They wanted to publish the songs. They were after the publishing income money. They had heard that they could make a fortune on that, and that's what they were looking for. They were auditioning people every day, and they were looking. So
they were emphasizing that you write songs as well. What happened next, Booker? Because Green Onions became a huge hit around the world.
Well, what happened next is I went out to Christian Brothers College and took my college entrance exam and packed up my things, and in September I went to Bloomington, Indiana, and checked into the dormitory and got entry into the school and started studying music theory every day at 7:30 in the morning.
And what did Estelle and Jim think of that? So you can't leave now, we're hotter than hot.
Exactly. I think they were pretty surprised that I followed through with my studies.
And so the rest of the guys just stayed and kept on being sidemen? Is that how it worked?
They did. They worked on other acts, and they did really well. They started a house band, and Isaac Hayes stepped in for me. Isaac Hayes and Marvell Thomas stepped in, took my place, and sometimes Joe Hall and other piano players around town. Came back on weekends. I came back every Friday. I was there Friday and Saturday and sometimes Sunday, and I'd drive late and be back to Indiana Monday morning.
Just for us Australians there, Booker, how long was the drive from Indiana back to Memphis?
400 miles. 7.5, 8 hours.
Yeah. Nice little drive for Australia. It's not that long, but it's a nice one.
Yeah. Yeah, Bloomington to Memphis. I could do it blindfolded.
Have you been to Australia, Booker?
I have been to Australia probably 7, 8 times. And I love Melbourne. I love your city. I love where you are. I have been to your Treasury. I've walked all over Treasury Gardens.
It's beautiful here, isn't it? Well, I still haven't made the pilgrimage to... Is the Capitol Theatre still there, Stax Records?
It is. It's rebuilt. It's renewed. It's a replica. Cropper gave him the plans, and he knew it by heart. He helped them rebuild it. It is basically still there. Definitely
a Stax Records would be on the tourist trail these days.
It is, yeah, it is.
I think Soul Dressing was the first album back for the MGs. Booker T and the MGs were back in 65.
Yeah, that was probably the first of my Indiana-inspired songs.
And you also went back to the session playing as well?
Yes, I did. Yeah, that was the income. That was the money. That was what was paying the bills.
Well, you guys continued on, and when I was a little kid, Booker, I'll bore you with my little story, but when I was a little kid, one of my earliest memories was here in Melbourne listening to the radio, and one of the songs that I remember clearly, and it's still one of my all-time favourites, is Time Is Tight.
Oh, really?
So, and then I found out much later that it was actually from a film, and I managed to see Uptight. So what was it like doing a movie soundtrack? The Booker T and the MG's album was the soundtrack to Uptight. So did your approach have to change?
By the time I wrote the theme for Uptight, I had studied nearly 3 years. That was 68. I had studied nearly 4 years. I had studied all the classical composers, and I had studied composition, and I've begun to come on into my own as far as my ideas about rhythm and melody. So I was a little more mature at that point. Booker T and the MGs was the perfect band for that song and for that movie. So the approach did change somewhat, yes.
So did you go in with the director, Jules Dassin, and he showed you the clips where I want music there, I want music there, or how did it come together?
It's a long story. Do you want to hear it?
It's my favourite Booker T song, so why not?
Jules had been operating in New York and Hollywood and Paris, and his wife was Melina McCurry. And they had done a movie called Never on Sunday, which is a pretty big hit. But in the States at the time, they were looking for communists. And Jules had been hanging out with some people that were not quite as right-wing as the country would have preferred back then. That was 1967, I think, maybe, 1968. And his wife was affiliated with the government in Greece, in Athens. Her father or her uncle was the mayor. Long story short, we got kicked out of the States. The whole movie company got kicked out. And to make things worse, I was on the beach just before Jules came to see me. I had to have surgery on my right leg. From playing the Hammond organ, I had rubbed my leg against the wooden bar underneath so much that it deteriorated all the bone. So they had to take bone out of my hip and replace the bone in my knees. When Jules came to talk to me, I was in Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Hollywood. That's where he offered me to do the movie. I said, Jules, you're crazy. I'm here. I got my leg up in a cast, and you're offering me to do a movie, to do music to a movie. He said, but I want you. They got a wheelchair, and they built a ramp out of Culver City for me, for my office. And we set up out there, and then got the news that we had to leave the country. So we did it in Paris. We moved, the whole operation moved to Paris. And that's where the theme was written. And I went back to Memphis and recorded the theme a second time for the album with Booker T and the MGs. And that's the story. Melina's father went on the Johnny Carson show and informed the country that the Greek hunter had taken over in Athens. And so we had a little warning, but it was a weird situation. We had to pack up. We were operating over in Culver City, and we just had to take off and leave the country.
That's when the dictatorship took over.
Yeah.
All right, Booker, try and get through it as fast as possible. So eventually the MGs, they recorded their last album, Melting Pot. That's a fantastic song, I've got to say.
No, thank you.
And it's been sampled many, many times?
Oh, well, that was a difficult period for me. The band had started to sound the same, and I had pretty much decided to leave the company. We recorded outside of Memphis, and that was an attempt to get a different sound. Everything we did before that sounded the same to me. It sounded like music we had already recorded. So I was pretty unhappy, but I was happy with Melting Pot.
That's one of your better albums, I think. A really good album. It's surprising that it was so good because of all the turmoil that was going on, too.
Yes, it was. Stax had sold a couple of years before and changed the way they operated, and it wasn't the same company at all. It was more of a corporate atmosphere, and they were owned by Paramount Pictures, and Paramount was pretty good. Paramount got me the movie gig and everything, but Paramount was owned by Gulf and Western, and they were running the movie company like a corporation, too. So it was not the same Stax. It was not the just come in and do something creative atmosphere that we'd had before.
Was Jim and Estelle, were they still there?
They were still there. They had given up a lot of the control to Al Bell at that time, and he was working with, he had developed a large network which helped the company grow, but at the same time it stunted a lot of the creative areas, I thought. It was good and bad at the same time.
But around this time, or just a bit before, you married Priscilla Coolidge, and basically your first albums away from the MGs were albums with your new wife. Would I be right in saying that?
They were, and A&M Records. And the marriage to Priscilla didn't last, but I made a good relationship with A&M Records. That was a marriage that I still talk to those people. You know, they haven't reprinted my vinyl. A&M hasn't.
How were they in comparison to the Booker T albums?
It was quite different. It's a different mentality completely. It's a complete change. Booker T and the MGs was instrumental, as Stax wanted to remain instrumental. And practically everything I did in California, besides Melting Pot, had words, vocal sentiments that were expressed in words.
What made you, I'm just guessing, but was Johnny I Love You from Uptight, was that the first vocal that you did?
It was. That was facilitate to trying to set the tone of the movie. That was why I sang that song. Normally, I didn't sing at Stax. I wasn't allowed to sing at Stax, actually. But it was necessary to sing that song.
I think, was it Judy Clay to sing one of the tracks as well?
Yeah, that was essential for setting the tone of the film also, because Judy just personified the feeling of the Martin Luther King effort and marches and the whole movement in 1968, culminated in Dr. King's death.
I quickly just go through your solo albums there, Booker, because Evergreen, I just loved the title track, the instrumental. What a great Booker T and the MG song, which wasn't a Booker T and the MG songs, but that's a great car driving song too, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like that, Evergreen. Yeah, it's a nice little melody.
Yeah, that's one that's been re-released with extra tracks on CD.
Yeah. Oh, that was a different company. That was Columbia, Epic Records.
So we're still waiting on the A&Ms, hey?
I guess. I don't know. I haven't talked to them about it. They don't own it. They were purchased, I think, by Polygram or some other company.
Oh, so Herb's not there anymore?
No, he's not there. He's not involved. I've been in touch with him, but he doesn't have any more. No, neither Jerry, neither of them are involved.
Okay. You know, Booker, you've had fantastic success and it's still going today. And I just quickly want to finish off with Sound the Alarm, which is your latest album, and you got a lot of guests in to sing and help you out. So something a little bit different for you, perhaps.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's a wide-ranging album, and everybody from Estelle to Gary Clark Jr. It reflects people that I've been meeting in recent years and younger musicians that I've been interested in, that have been interested in working with me, including my son and groups like Vintage Trouble, people that love the Stax tradition. Maya Hawthorne, I met him through Daryl Hall in New York, and it's a group of people that kind of reflect my travels and my interactions at different places in the business.
So did you write the song and say maybe Estelle would be good here, or was there some sort of forward planning?
That was for her. Yeah, she was requested to do that. I love her voice. She's got such a unique style. And then there was also, I want to mention Bill's daughter, Corey Withers, that we brought in on that album. We've been continuing to work together, too. Oh,
yes, of course, you produced Ain't No Sunshine.
Yeah, Bill Withers, that's his daughter. Yeah, and then my son Ted is playing on blues, so father-son blues. He's been working with me a lot on stage now. Gary's kind of like a son to me, too. He grew up in Austin, and he's playing the traditional blues, Gary Clark Jr.
And Booker, finally, what are you up to at the moment?
Now I'm doing a lot of touring, and I'm working on the book, the memoirs. I'm working on the outline for the book. It's a big project for me, and getting inspiration for another album.
And what's the title of the book?
I don't have the title.
You don't have one? Okay. Well, we'll look forward to it. No. Booker, I want to thank you very much for taking time to talk with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Good luck with your future projects.
You're welcome. Come see me next time I'm in Melbourne. It'll be good to meet you.
Yeah,
thanks for calling.
Fantastic. Thank you, Booker T.
You're welcome, Nick.